A day that changed everything. The alarm clock buzzed in the dim room, echoing like a fire alarm in Jaden's ears. He shot up, silencing the alarm with a swift hand. The 12-year-old took a deep breath, his eyes adjusting to the faint light spilling through the worn curtains. It was 5:30 a.m., and he was already bracing himself for another day of responsibilities far beyond his years. In the small apartment they called home, the air was a blend of exhaustion and determination. From the other room, he could hear his mother's raspy breathing. She was still asleep after pulling another double shift at the hospital cafeteria. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Barely. Jaden's first task was to check on his 8-year-old sister, Leela. She lay sprawled on her small bed, her face peaceful. Unlike him, she didn't know the weight of their struggles. She still believed their father was away on a business trip. Jaden didn't have the heart to tell her the truth, that their father had disappeared 6 months ago without a trace, leaving them to fend for themselves. Jaden tiptoed to the kitchen, a space smaller than most closets. He opened the pantry, grimacing at its meager contents: half a bag of oats, a jar of peanut butter, and a tin of soup. He decided on oatmeal with a drizzle of honey for breakfast. As the oats simmered, he ironed Lila's school uniform using a second-hand iron that sputtered more than it steamed. He had learned to do this from YouTube tutorials, becoming the caregiver they desperately needed. "Leela, wake up," he called softly, setting a bowl of oatmeal on the table. She stirred, rubbing her eyes as she shuffled to the kitchen. "Morning, Jaden," she mumbled, spooning the oatmeal into her mouth. Her innocence was both a blessing and a reminder of the responsibilities he carried. He wanted her to stay unaware, to keep believing their life was normal. By 7:00 a.m., Jaden had packed her lunch, a peanut butter sandwich and a bruised apple. He tucked it into her backpack and grabbed his own, which was held together by duct tape. Their walk to school was a quiet one, interrupted only by the occasional rattle of an old shopping cart pushed by someone less fortunate. The Riverside district wasn't known for its prosperity, but it was home. As they passed Murphy's corner store, the familiar scent of freshly baked bread greeted them. Old Mr. Murphy waved from behind the counter, his wrinkled face breaking into a warm smile. "Got something for you, Jaden," he called, holding out an overripe banana. "Can't sell this, but it's still good." "Thanks, Mr. Murphy," Jaden said, pocketing the banana. He knew it would make a good snack later. The walk took them past a new construction site, where an old hardware store had been demolished to make way for a flashy high-rise. The sign read, "Coming soon, Carlton Towers." Jaden didn't like the changes happening in their neighborhood. It felt like everything familiar was being replaced by something cold and uninviting. "Fancy car," Leila whispered, pointing to a sleek black vehicle parked across the street. Its windows were tinted, hiding whoever was inside. "Don't stare," Jaden said, pulling her along. But he couldn't help noticing the man in a tailored suit stepping out of the car. The man glanced at them briefly before disappearing into the construction site. Something about him felt off, but Jaden couldn't put his finger on it. At school, Jaden's best friend, Mia, was waiting near the rusty bike racks. Her curly hair was tied back with a ribbon that had seen better days, but her smile was bright as ever. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said, falling into step beside him. "Mom needed help last night," Jaden replied. He didn't elaborate. Mia understood. Her family wasn't much better off. They walked together to class, but Maya stopped before entering. "My dad says there's something weird about all these new buildings going up," she said. "Says someone's buying everything out." Jaden wanted to ask more, but the bell rang, cutting their conversation short. The day passed in a blur of lessons and whispered jokes, but Mia's words stayed with him. Something about the man in the black car and the construction site nagged at his mind. The real turning point came that afternoon. The school day had ended, and Jaden was walking Layla home. She skipped ahead, chatting about her art project, while Jaden followed, half listening. They passed the construction site again, the air heavy with the scent of wet cement and sawdust. Then it happened. The screech of tires shattered the air, followed by a woman's scream. Jaden's head whipped around. A young mother had tripped on the uneven sidewalk, and her baby carriage was rolling uncontrollably toward the street. At the same time, a delivery truck was barreling around the corner, its driver unaware of the impending disaster. Without thinking, Jaden dropped his backpack and sprinted toward the carriage. Time seemed to slow. He could hear Layla screaming his name, but he didn't stop. He lunged, grabbing the carriage's handle just as its front wheels teetered on the curb. The truck's horn blared as it swerved, missing them by inches. The world came rushing back in a cacophony of noise, cries, gasps, and applause. The young mother scooped her baby into her arms, tears streaming down her face. "Oh my God, thank you," she sobbed. "You saved my baby." Jaden nodded, too shaken to speak. The crowd that had gathered murmured in awe, some recording the scene on their phones. That's when he noticed the black car parked across the street again. The man in the suit was watching, a strange expression on his face. The man stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. "Young man," he said, his voice deep and authoritative. That was extraordinary. He extended a hand. "Carlton Reed," he introduced himself. "I'd like to speak with your parents. What you did today shows remarkable character." Jaden stared at the man, unsure what to say. His instinct told him to be cautious, but Carlton's words were smooth, almost hypnotic. Before Jaden could respond, Mia appeared at his side, breathless from running. "Jaden, are you okay?" she asked, gripping his arm. Then her eyes narrowed as she looked at Carlton. She whispered, "That's him. That's the guy my dad warned me about." Carlton's gaze flicked to Mia, and his smile faltered ever so slightly. "I see you have friends who care for you," he said, handing Jaden a business card. "Think about my offer." As Carlton walked away, Jaden felt the weight of the card in his hand. The man had promised opportunities, but Mia's warning echoed in his ears. He had no idea that his simple act of bravery would set off a chain of events that would test everything he believed in. The golden promise. The aftermath of the rescue lingered in Jaden's mind like the echo of a storm. That evening, their tiny apartment was filled with an unusual buzz. Word of his bravery had spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Mrs. Rodriguez dropped off a tray of enchiladas, and Mr. Murphy himself came by with a basket of bruised but sweet-smelling apples. His mother, Emily, returned home looking more exhausted than usual but couldn't hide her pride. She held Jaden tightly, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. "My brave boy," she whispered. "Your father would be so proud." Her mention of his father sent a pang through Jaden's chest, but he pushed it aside, focusing instead on Leela, who was recounting the event to anyone who would listen. And then Jaden ran faster than lightning and grabbed the stroller like a superhero. She exclaimed, her hands gesturing wildly. The truck was like, "Honk honk," and Jaden was like, "No way." Despite her dramatization, Jaden let her have her moment. He couldn't shake the memory of Carlton Reed. The man's perfectly polished demeanor, his tailored suit, and the business card now sitting on the kitchen table felt out of place in their world. Later that night, after Leela was asleep and the dishes were done, Emily picked up the card, running her fingers over the embossed letters. "Carlton Reed," she read aloud, her brow furrowed. "He wants to meet with me." Jaden nodded, watching her reaction closely. "He said something about opportunities and helping us." Emily exhaled, her tired face reflecting a mixture of hope and skepticism. "Jaden, sometimes people promise the moon and stars, but there's always a cost." "But Mom," Jaden argued, "what if he's serious? What if this is our chance to, I don't know, finally catch a break?" She studied him, her expression softening. "Maybe. But remember what your father always said. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is." Jaden finished, his voice quieter. Emily nodded. "We'll see what he has to say." The next morning, Carlton Reed's sleek black car pulled up outside their building. Jaden felt out of place in his best shirt, which still had a stubborn wrinkle despite his best efforts. Leela, on the other hand, twirled in her worn sneakers, marveling at the car's shiny exterior. Inside, the car was even more luxurious than it appeared. The seats were buttery leather, and the air smelled faintly of cedar and something expensive that Jaden couldn't place. Carlton greeted them warmly at the door to his office, a sprawling space on the top floor of a downtown skyscraper. The office felt like another world. Polished marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic views of the city, and art pieces that probably cost more than their entire apartment complex. Jaden and Leela sat on plush leather chairs, their feet barely touching the floor, while Carlton poured coffee for Emily and offered hot chocolate with marshmallows to the kids. "I'll be direct," Carlton began, sitting across from them with the practiced ease of a man who knew how to command attention. "What Jaden did yesterday was extraordinary. It showed courage, quick thinking, and character, qualities this city needs more of." Emily glanced at Jaden, pride flickering in her tired eyes. "That's why I want to help," Carlton continued. "I believe in nurturing potential. Here's what I'm proposing. A full scholarship for both children at Westbrook Academy, one of the best schools in the state, a new apartment in our Highland Towers complex, fully furnished, and Emily, a position for you in hospital administration, with a salary that reflects your dedication." Emily's hand trembled as she set her coffee down. "Mr. Reed, it's too generous." Carlton leaned forward, his smile disarming. "Please call me Carlton. And it's not generosity, it's investment. Jaden here represents the best of what this city has to offer, and I want to make sure his future is as bright as it can be." Jaden couldn't help but feel flattered. His mother looked torn, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. The offer was life-changing. For a moment, Jaden allowed himself to imagine it. Leela in a proper school uniform, their fridge always full, his mom coming home from work smiling instead of worn down. But something about Carlton's polished demeanor and the way his words seemed almost too perfect made Jaden uneasy. His eyes scanned the room, landing on a small, blinking red light hidden behind a decorative plant. A security camera. His unease grew when he noticed more cameras tucked into the corners of the office. "Can we think about it?" Emily finally asked. "Of course," Carlton replied smoothly. "But I'll be honest, this opportunity doesn't come around often. I'd encourage you to decide quickly." The following week was a whirlwind. Emily ultimately accepted the offer, unable to turn down the chance to provide a better life for her children. Within days, they moved into a spacious 3-bedroom apartment in Highland Towers. Leela squealed with delight as she explored their new home. Her room had a window that overlooked a lush park, and the closets were already stocked with new clothes. Jaden's room felt like it belonged to someone else. A sleek desk, a bed that didn't squeak, and even a flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. At first, everything felt like a dream. Their fridge was always full, the furniture was modern and comfortable, and Emily seemed lighter, her face no longer etched with constant worry. Lila twirled in her new uniform, showing it off to Jaden. "It's like we're rich," she exclaimed. But Jaden couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The first oddity came when he tried to visit Mia. At their old neighborhood, no one would have stopped him from dropping by a friend's house. But here, the building's security guards blocked his way. "Miss Martinez isn't on your approved visitors list," the guard said flatly. "Approved visitors list," Jaden repeated, confused. He didn't even know such a thing existed. Another red flag appeared when their new phones arrived, courtesy of Carlton Industries. They were pre-installed with safety apps that tracked their locations and monitored their usage. The explanation was that it was for their protection, but Jaden couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At school, Westbrook Academy was everything Carlton had promised: state-of-the-art facilities, small class sizes, and an endless list of extracurricular activities. But Jaden quickly realized he didn't fit in. The other students, dressed in designer clothes and surrounded by luxury, looked at him like he didn't belong. Whispers followed him wherever he went. The charity case, he overheard one girl say during lunch. Only one student, Peter Chun, made an effort to befriend him. Peter was quiet but kind, often sharing his lunch with Jaden and introducing him to his favorite comic books. One afternoon, as they worked on a computer project, Peter leaned in close. "My dad works in it for Carlton Industries," he whispered. "He says something weird is going on. They're collecting data on families, especially in your old neighborhood." Jaden's heart skipped a beat. Why would they do that? Peter shrugged, but his expression was grave. "I don't know, but your dad's name came up in one of the files." Before Jaden could press for more, Peter abruptly changed the subject, as if afraid to say more. The next day, Peter was gone, transferred to a school overseas. That night, unable to sleep, Jaden decided to investigate. His mother's laptop was open on the kitchen counter, a document minimized on the screen. It was labeled Project Butterfly, Community Acquisition Phase 2. Before he could read further, he heard footsteps. Quickly closing the laptop, he turned to see Lila standing in the hallway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Why are you still up?" she asked sleepily. "Just checking something for school," Jaden lied. As he tucked her back into bed, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the secrets he was uncovering. Somewhere in the glossy world Carlton had built for them, a darker truth was lurking, waiting to be exposed, and Jaden was determined to find it. Shadows in the light. Jaden's nights grew restless as unease settled into his bones. Carlton Reed's promises had come with too many strings, each tightening like a noose. The luxurious new apartment and the supposed opportunities at Westbrook Academy felt like gilded cages, their walls whispering secrets Jaden couldn't yet understand. It had been weeks since their move, and while his mother and sister seemed to adjust to their new life, Jaden's instincts told him something wasn't right. Every step in the pristine hallways of Highland Towers was shadowed by the weight of invisible eyes, and every interaction felt like a script he was unknowingly part of. The incident with Peter Chun had left Jaden shaken. Peter's cryptic words about Carlton Industries collecting data on families, coupled with his sudden transfer, gnawed at Jaden's thoughts. Peter wasn't just a classmate. He was the first person at Westbrook who made Jaden feel less like an outsider. Now, Peter was gone, and Jaden had more questions than answers. The breakthrough came on an overcast Saturday afternoon. Emily was at work, and Leela was engrossed in a cartoon marathon, leaving Jaden free to explore. His mind kept circling back to the document he had glimpsed on his mother's laptop. Project Butterfly. Community Acquisition Phase 2. What did it mean? And why was his family suddenly at the center of it? Jaden waited until Leela was distracted, then retrieved the laptop from his mother's room. He had no idea how to bypass her password, but a recent computer class at Westbrook had introduced him to basic programming tools. After a tense 20 minutes, he managed to unlock the device. His heart raced as he navigated to the minimized document. The first page was innocuous enough. Just a corporate header with the Carlton Industries logo and a vague mission statement about urban renewal. But as he scrolled, the language became more ominous. Phase 1. Strategic acquisition of key properties. Phase 2. Community influence and data aggregation. Phase 3. Behavioral integration metrics. Pilot trials. Each bullet point was accompanied by detailed charts and maps, many of which highlighted Jaden's old neighborhood. His breath caught as he saw a familiar address. Murphy's Corner Store. What does strategic acquisition mean? Jaden muttered, scrolling faster. The document referenced surveillance methods, community persuasion, and metrics for compliance adaptation. The language was vague but chilling, painting a picture of a company more interested in control than community improvement. At the bottom of the document, an attachment caught his eye. Project Butterfly. Video brief. Jaden hesitated, his finger hovering over the file. Finally, he clicked. The video began with Carlton Reed, seated in the same sleek office where Jaden had first met him. His polished smile was in place, but the tone of his voice was different, colder, calculated. "Phase 2 is proceeding as planned," Carlton said. "We've secured over 70% of the targeted properties. Resistance remains minimal, but key individuals in the community may require additional persuasion. Ensure that all data streams remain uncompromised. Remember, the success of Project Butterfly hinges on absolute discretion." The video ended abruptly, leaving Jaden's mind spinning. Resistance, persuasion, data streams. It all sounded less like a community project and more like a coordinated takeover. Before he could process further, the laptop screen went dark. A warning popped up. Unauthorized access detected. System locked. Panic surged through Jaden. He slammed the laptop shut and shoved it back under his mother's desk. Had Carlton's team noticed? Was someone already on their way? That evening, Jaden's anxiety reached a boiling point when a knock came at their apartment door. He froze, his pulse hammering in his ears. Emily opened the door to reveal one of the building's security guards. "Mrs. Thompson," the man said, his voice neutral. "Mr. Reed has requested a meeting with your son tomorrow morning. He'll arrange for transportation." Emily glanced at Jaden, her expression a mixture of confusion and concern. "Why does Carlton want to see you?" "I don't know," Jaden lied, his stomach churning. The guard handed over a formal-looking envelope, nodded, and left. Inside was an invitation on thick, expensive paper to Jaden Thompson. From Carlton Reed. Subject: Future Opportunities. Jaden, I believe you have the potential to be an integral part of our community's growth. Let's discuss the next steps in ensuring a brighter future for you and your family. Emily frowned as she read the letter. "Jaden, this doesn't feel right. What does Carlton want with you?" Jaden hesitated. He wanted to tell her everything: the document, the video, the surveillance. But he couldn't. "Not yet. I think he just wants to talk about the scholarship," he said, avoiding her eyes. Emily sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "If you're going, I'll come with you." Jaden shook his head. "No, Mom. I'll be fine. It's probably just some school thing." She looked unconvinced, but eventually relented. "Be careful, Jaden." The next morning, the sleek black car arrived promptly at 9:00 a.m. Jaden climbed into the back seat, his heart pounding. The ride was silent except for the faint hum of the engine. The car pulled into Carlton Industries' downtown headquarters, and Jaden was escorted to the top floor. Carlton was waiting in his office, his demeanor as polished as ever. "Jaden," he greeted warmly, gesturing to a chair. "It's good to see you." Jaden sat, gripping the armrests to steady himself. "Why am I here?" Carlton smiled, leaning back in his chair. "You've proven yourself to be resourceful, intelligent, and brave. Those qualities are rare, especially in someone your age." Jaden stayed silent, waiting for the man to get to the point. "I want to offer you an opportunity," Carlton continued. "A chance to truly make a difference, not just for your family, but for your entire community." "What kind of opportunity?" Jaden asked warily. Carlton's smile widened, but his eyes remained cold. "An internship of sorts. You'll work directly with me, learning the ins and outs of leadership, business strategy, and community development." Jaden felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't about helping him. It was about grooming him, molding him into something Carlton could control. "What about my family?" Jaden asked. "They'll benefit greatly," Carlton replied smoothly. "Your mother's position at the hospital is secure, and your sister will continue to thrive at Westbrook. All I ask is your loyalty." The word loyalty hung in the air like a threat. Jaden's mind raced. Carlton knew about the document. He must have. This wasn't a friendly meeting. It was a warning. Jaden forced himself to nod. "I'll think about it." "Good," Carlton said, standing and extending a hand. I look forward to working with you. Jaden shook his hand, suppressing the urge to recoil. As he left the office, his mind was made up. He couldn't trust Carlton, and he couldn't let this man control his life, or his family's. Back at home, Jaden locked himself in his room and retrieved the folder Mia had given him weeks ago. Inside were more details about Carlton Industries, including newspaper clippings about businesses in their neighborhood that had mysteriously shut down. One article caught his eye. Local journalist disappears after investigating real estate corruption. The journalist's name was David Thompson, his father. Jaden's chest tightened as the pieces began to fall into place. His father had been investigating Carlton before he vanished. Carlton's promise of opportunities wasn't a gift, it was a leash. And now Jaden realized he was being offered the same leash. But Jaden wasn't his father. He wouldn't disappear quietly. If Carlton thought he could manipulate him, he was wrong. It was time to fight back. And Jaden had a plan. Unmasking the monster. The revelation hit Jaden like a freight train. The article about his father's disappearance wasn't just a clue, it was confirmation. Carlton Reed wasn't a savior or a benevolent businessman. He was a puppet master, pulling strings, silencing opposition, and shaping lives like clay in his hands. Sitting on the floor of his room, Jaden clutched the manila folder tightly. His heart raced as his mind spun through possibilities. What had his father discovered that made him a target? And more importantly, how could Jaden bring the truth to light without putting his family in danger? That night, the apartment felt suffocating. Emily was humming softly as she cooked dinner, and Leela was sprawled on the couch, drawing pictures of their old neighborhood. Jaden couldn't focus on anything except the weight of the folder and the USB drive he had hidden inside his school backpack. After dinner, Jaden excused himself, retreating to his room. He booted up his laptop, plugged in the USB, and watched as its contents unfolded. His father's investigative files were meticulously organized, each folder labeled with cryptic names: silent takeovers, surveillance logs, and Carlton core strategy. Jaden opened the first file and froze. It contained a series of emails between Carlton and his executives, detailing tactics to acquire properties in Riverside. The messages spoke of coercion tactics, manufactured code violations, and financial entrapment. Businesses like Murphy's Corner Store and Pete's Hardware had been targeted, their owners pressured into selling or driven to bankruptcy. As he scrolled further, Jaden found something even more chilling. Surveillance logs. There were transcripts of conversations recorded without consent, detailed reports on the movements of neighborhood leaders, and dossiers on families, including his own. One file was labeled Thompson Family, Priority Target. Jaden's stomach churned as he opened it. The file contained a timeline of his father's investigation, annotated with chilling commentary. Feb 5. David Thompson approached Carlton Tower contractors for interviews. He's getting too close to Phase 2. Feb 12. Begin disinformation campaign. Leak rumors of his financial troubles. Feb 20. Meeting scheduled. Offer incentive to cease investigation. Feb 21. Thompson remains defiant. Initiate Phase 3 measures. The last entry was a single line. Neutralized. No further action required. Jaden stared at the screen, his vision blurring with tears. His father hadn't just disappeared, he'd been silenced. Carlton Reed had orchestrated everything, weaving a web of lies and manipulation to maintain his empire. The next morning, Jaden approached Mia at their old meeting spot behind Murphy's Corner Store. He had sent her an encrypted message from a library computer late the previous night, asking her to bring any new information her father had uncovered. Mia arrived with her usual determined expression, clutching a weathered folder. "You found something, didn't you?" she asked, skipping pleasantries. Jaden nodded, his voice low. "My dad didn't just disappear, Mia. Carlton. He had him neutralized. He's been targeting our neighborhood for years, using surveillance, blackmail, and God knows what else. Mia's face paled, but she wasn't surprised. My dad's been saying the same thing for months. He told me Carlton's goal isn't just buying properties, it's controlling people. Look at this. She handed him the folder, which contained satellite images and detailed plans for a project called Phase 3, Behavioral Integration. According to the documents, Carlton Industries had been using their developments to monitor and influence the residents' behavior, from their spending habits to their political views. It's like he's building a city within a city, Maya said, her voice trembling. A place where he controls everything, who lives there, what they do, how they think. Jaden's jaw tightened. We have to stop him. That evening, Jaden and Mia convened in the dimly lit library of their old community center, which Mia's father still managed to keep running despite mounting pressure from Carlton Industries. They spread out the evidence they had collected: Jaden's USB drive, Mia's folder, and the notes her father had compiled over months. Mia's father, Mr. Martinez, joined them, his face lined with worry, but also determination. We've been gathering evidence for months, he said, but Carlton's influence runs deep. If we're going to take him down, we need to expose him on a level he can't suppress. Jaden frowned. How? He owns half the city. The media, the schools, even the police, he's got them all in his pocket. Not all of them, Mr. Martinez said, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. There's an independent journalist I trust. Her name is Elena Greaves. She's been looking for a big story, and this might be it. Over the next few days, Jaden and Mia worked tirelessly to compile their evidence into a coherent narrative. Late at night, Jaden would sneak out of Highland Towers and meet Mia at the community center, where they uploaded files, organized timelines, and rehearsed what they would tell Elena. But Carlton's shadow loomed larger than ever. Jaden noticed more cameras in their apartment complex, and the security guards seemed to watch him with greater scrutiny. One evening, a note was slipped under their door. It read, Jaden, you're a smart boy, but don't let your curiosity get the better of you. Some truths are best left buried. Jaden crumpled the note in his fist, his resolve hardening. He couldn't let Carlton scare him into submission. The meeting with Elena Greaves was set for a Friday evening at a small cafe outside the city, far from Carlton's influence. Jaden, Mia, and Mr. Martinez arrived early, their nerves palpable. Elena, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, listened intently as they laid out their findings. Her expression shifted from curiosity to shock to righteous anger. This is explosive, she said, flipping through the documents. But it's also dangerous. If Carlton catches wind of this before I can publish, he'll bury it. And us. Jaden met her gaze, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. We're ready to take that risk. We just want the truth out. Elena nodded. Then let's do this. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. Elena worked tirelessly to verify the evidence, cross-referencing Jaden's files with her own sources. By Sunday morning, the story was ready. The Empire of Shadows. How Carlton Industries controls lives through deception and fear. Elena promised to publish the article online and in print simultaneously, ensuring it reached as many people as possible before Carlton could suppress it. But as the clock ticked closer to the scheduled release time, Jaden couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go horribly wrong. And he was right. That night, as Jaden sat in his room waiting for the article to go live, the power in their apartment abruptly cut out. The hum of electricity was replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of heavy boots in the hallway. Jaden. Emily's panicked voice echoed from the living room. What's going on? Before he could answer, the door burst open, and two men in dark suits stepped inside. One of them held up a badge. Mr. Thompson, the man said coldly. You're coming with us. Jaden's heart pounded as the shadows finally closed in. A prison of power. Jaden's world had never felt more fragile than it did in that moment. The two men in suits loomed in the doorway of their apartment, their faces unreadable. Behind them, a third figure entered. Carlton Reed himself, the embodiment of calm authority. He stood in their cramped living room as if it were his own, his gaze sweeping the space before landing on Jaden. "Young man," Carlton began, his tone soft but laced with menace, "I gave you an opportunity to embrace something greater. Instead, you've chosen to meddle in affairs far beyond your understanding." Emily stepped in front of Jaden, her voice trembling but firm. "Mr. Reed, you have no right to come into my home like this." Carlton's smile was almost pitying. "Mrs. Thompson, I've been nothing but generous to your family. The apartment, the school, the job, all of it was a gesture of goodwill. But your son," his eyes narrowed, "he's testing the limits of that goodwill." Jaden clenched his fists, stepping around his mother. "You mean I'm asking questions you don't want answered?" Carlton's smile vanished. He signaled to the men, who approached Jaden with measured steps. Emily tried to intervene, but one of the men blocked her path, his expression apologetic but firm. "Don't touch him," Emily shouted, her voice cracking. "Enough," Carlton said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Jaden, you're coming with me. Your mother and sister will remain safe as long as you cooperate." Jaden hesitated, his heart pounding. He glanced at his mother, whose eyes were wide with fear, and at Leela, who had emerged from her room clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Jaden," she whispered. He met her gaze, forcing a small smile. "It's okay, Lila. I'll be back soon." Jaden allowed himself to be led out of the apartment. As the door closed behind him, he heard his mother yelling and Leela crying, the sounds muffled by the heavy door. It took everything in him not to turn back. Carlton's black car whisked Jaden away into the city's heart, the streetlights blurring into streaks of yellow and white. The silence in the car was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the engine. Jaden's mind raced, replaying the events of the past weeks. He had uncovered too much, and now he was paying the price. The car pulled into the underground garage of Carlton Industries headquarters. Jaden was escorted through a series of sleek, sterile hallways until they reached a conference room. The walls were glass, offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. Carlton gestured for Jaden to sit. "I admire your courage," Carlton began, pouring himself a glass of water. "Few people would dare challenge someone like me. But courage without wisdom is reckless." Jaden crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. "What do you want?" Carlton leaned forward, his expression almost fatherly. "I want to give you a chance to fix this. You've made some unfortunate choices, but you're young. You can still redeem yourself." Jaden's stomach churned. "Redeem myself by what?" "Staying silent while you destroy my neighborhood, while you control people like they're pieces on a chessboard." Carlton's lips pressed into a thin line. "You're looking at this the wrong way. What I do isn't destruction, it's progress. I take chaotic, failing systems and make them efficient. I create order where there was none. By threatening people, by ruining lives." Jaden shot back. Carlton's expression darkened. "Sometimes sacrifices are necessary for the greater good. Your father didn't understand that, and now you're making the same mistake." Jaden's breath caught. "What did you do to my father?" Carlton didn't answer immediately. He stood, walking to the window and looking out over the city. David Thompson was a talented journalist. He could have been a great ally, but he was stubborn. He thought exposing my operations would help people. All it did was make him a liability. Jaden's hands clenched into fists. "So you got rid of him?" Carlton turned to face him, his expression unreadable. "Let's just say your father underestimated the consequences of his actions." Jaden's heart pounded with rage and grief, but he forced himself to stay composed. "If you think I'm going to stop, you're wrong. I'm going to finish what my father started." Carlton sighed, as if disappointed. "I was afraid you'd say that, which is why I've prepared for this moment." He pressed a button on the table, and a screen descended from the ceiling. It displayed live footage of Emily and Leela in their apartment. Emily was pacing, her phone pressed to her ear, while Leela sat on the couch, hugging her rabbit. "I've ensured their safety," Carlton said, his voice calm but chilling. "As long as you cooperate, they'll remain unharmed." Jaden felt cold fury rise within him. "You're threatening my family." "I'm protecting them," Carlton corrected. "From you. Your actions have consequences, Jaden. Think about what's at stake." The meeting ended with Carlton giving Jaden a simple choice: fall in line or risk losing everything. Jaden was escorted to a small windowless room where he was left alone with his thoughts. The walls felt like they were closing in, and the weight of Carlton's ultimatum pressed down on him like a boulder. But Jaden wasn't ready to give up. He still had the USB drive and the knowledge his father had left behind. He just needed a way to get the truth out, even if it meant risking everything. Hours later, the door to Jaden's room opened. A young woman stepped inside, her expression tense but kind. She wore a crisp suit, her ID badge identifying her as Rebecca Hall, Internal Affairs. "I'm here to help," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "Your father wasn't the first to challenge Carlton, and you won't be the last. There are people inside this company who want to see him fall." Jaden stared at her, his hope flickering like a dying ember. "Why should I trust you?" Rebecca pulled a small flash drive from her pocket and placed it on the table. "Because I believe in what your father started, and because Carlton's power isn't as absolute as he thinks." Jaden hesitated, then nodded. "What's the plan?" Rebecca leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're going to take him down. From the inside." The collapse of an empire. Jaden felt the weight of Rebecca's words settle on his shoulders. The idea of taking down someone as powerful as Carlton Reed seemed impossible, but he had no choice. Carlton had threatened his family, manipulated his neighborhood, and was responsible for his father's disappearance. It was time to fight back, not with brute force, but with the one thing Carlton underestimated: the truth. Rebecca leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "We don't have much time. Carlton's already suspicious, and if he realizes you're working against him, he won't hesitate to act." Jaden nodded, his mind racing. "What do we do?" Rebecca slid the flash drive across the table. "This contains a blueprint of Carlton Industries' digital infrastructure. It's not just a corporation. It's a surveillance empire. Every phone call, email, transaction. It's all monitored and stored." Jaden swallowed hard. "So how do we expose it?" "There's a secure server room on the 47th floor," Rebecca explained. "That's where he keeps the master files. If we can access it and upload the data to an external source, we can share it with every major news outlet in the country." "How do I get in there without him knowing?" Jaden asked. Rebecca smirked. "Leave that to me." That evening, under the cover of night, Rebecca escorted Jaden through a labyrinth of hallways in Carlton Industries headquarters. The building was eerily quiet, the hum of fluorescent lights and the soft buzz of security cameras the only sounds. Jaden's heart pounded as they approached a locked door with a keypad. Rebecca pulled out a small device from her bag and attached it to the keypad. "This will bypass the security system," she whispered, "but it'll only give us a 5-minute window." Jaden nodded, his hands trembling as the door clicked open. Inside was a room lined with servers, their lights blinking like a digital heartbeat. The air was cold, and the faint hum of machinery filled the space. "Here," Rebecca said, handing him the flash drive. "Plug it into the main terminal." Jaden approached the central console, his breath hitching. His hand shook as he inserted the flash drive and began typing, following the instructions Rebecca had given him. The screen lit up with a progress bar, the files transferring slowly but steadily. "Come on," Jaden muttered under his breath, glancing at the progress bar. 20%, 30%, 50%. Suddenly, an alarm blared, shattering the silence. Rebecca cursed under her breath, pulling out a walkie-talkie. "We've been made. We need to move now." "I'm almost done." Jaden shouted, his fingers flying over the keyboard. The progress bar inched forward. 70%, 80%, 90%. The door burst open, and 2 security guards stormed in. Rebecca stepped forward, blocking their path. "You don't want to do this," she said, her tone icy. "Do you really want to protect a man like Carlton Reed?" The guards hesitated, but only for a moment. They advanced, forcing Rebecca to retreat. Jaden's heart raced as the progress bar finally hit 100%. "Got it," he yelled, pulling the flash drive free. "Run," Rebecca shouted, shoving one of the guards aside. Jaden bolted, the flash drive clutched tightly in his hand. Rebecca followed, the sound of heavy footsteps echoing behind them. They sprinted down the hallway, weaving through corridors until they reached an emergency stairwell. "Upstairs," Rebecca said, panting. "The rooftop." Jaden didn't question her. They climbed the stairs 2 at a time, bursting onto the rooftop where a helicopter was waiting. The blades whipped the air into a frenzy as a man in a pilot's uniform waved them over. "Get in," Rebecca yelled. Jaden jumped into the helicopter, his heart pounding. Rebecca followed, slamming the door shut as the helicopter lifted off. Below, the city lights spread out like a sea of stars, and the chaos of Carlton Industries faded into the distance. Once they were safely out of range, Rebecca handed Jaden a satellite phone. "Call this number," she said. "It's Elena Greaves. She's waiting for the files." Jaden nodded, dialing the number with shaky hands. Elena's voice came through, calm and steady. "Jaden, is it done?" "Yes," Jaden said. "I have everything. Where do I send it?" Elena gave him an encrypted email address, and Jaden connected the flash drive to the satellite phone, transferring the files. It took a few minutes, but when the progress bar hit 100%, Jaden felt a wave of relief. "It's done," he said, exhaling deeply. "Good," Elena replied. "This story will be everywhere by morning. You've done something incredible, Jaden." The next day, the headlines broke. Carlton Reed's empire of deceit exposed. Every major news outlet carried the story, detailing the surveillance, blackmail, and corruption that had propped up Carlton Industries. The files Jaden had uncovered included damning evidence of Carlton's illegal activities, including his role in the disappearance of David Thompson. The fallout was swift. Authorities raided Carlton Industries, seizing assets and arresting executives. Carlton himself went into hiding, his polished image shattered. Jaden and his family were placed in protective custody, but for the first time in months, they felt a sense of hope. Emily hugged Jaden tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You're just like your father," she whispered, "brave, determined, and unshakable." Leela clung to him, her eyes wide with admiration. "You're my hero, Jaden." Weeks later, Jaden stood in the park near their old neighborhood. The community was rallying together, rebuilding after the damage Carlton had caused. Murphy's corner store had reopened, and familiar faces smiled and waved as Jaden passed. Mia joined him, her expression bright. "You did it," she said. "You really did it." Jaden nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "We did it." As the sun set over the city, Jaden felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in months. The fight wasn't over. There were still challenges ahead, and Carlton Reed might one day resurface. But for now, the truth had won, and Jaden knew his father would be proud. The boy who had saved a baby from a truck had grown into a young man who saved a community. And this was only the beginning.